Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I'm Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, it is another Miami rewatch show, which means we're going to spend at least half of the show explaining to people we're having a conversation about one game. These are our takeaways from watching one game. We're going to watch other games, but these are conversations from one game. And then the comments we filled with people saying, yeah, but what about what he did in this game? And it's like, well, we haven't rewatched that game yet. So we'll get there. Don't worry. Just know that if you comment that in the comments, everyone's going to go, they talked about this off the top, dummy.
Yeah. So, and we know that you're watching the start of this. So understand the start of it. We will talk more about other games. This is Miami, Notre Dame season opener. And Tom, as I was rewatching this game, it's like, oh, I remember that play.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that play. I remember this because pretty much everybody watched this game on a Sunday and enjoyed it. And even though it was a pretty slow start. So Tom, let's talk about what we took away from this. And I just want to go ahead and start with Carson Beck. And because if you talk about CJ Carr, that was his first start. Of course, it's going to be difficult. It's Julian saying first start. Of course, it's going to be difficult. This was not Carson Beck's first start. His first start with the Hurricanes, but of course, very experienced guy, 20 for 31, 205 yards, 2 touchdowns. And so much of this was just short passing and not accurate short passing. And some of those quick short passes, guys are having to reach down to their ankles to catch. And so I was not all that impressed by Carson Beck in this one. And when you look at where he was throwing the ball, he was, a lot of short passes, right? So behind the line of scrimmage, he was 4 of 7 in this game. Between the 1 to 5 yards downfield, 9 of 9. So half of his throws went 5 yards or under. Mm-hmm. And then the stat broadcast here has it broken down. Mid-range passing, which is 5 to 14 yards, which is a pretty wide range. He was 6 of 7, and I'm wondering how many of those were closer to the 5 than the 14. Also, you should never have numbers that overlap. Like, it shouldn't be 1 to 5 and then 5 to 14. Just so you know, I learned that in college. But on his deep passing of 15 yards or more, 1 of 7. At the time, we talked about the Miami, Texas A&M game, about the wind and the impact that it had on the passing. I don't know that was the issue here. This was just not a very accurate Carson Beck overall. And then 20 for 31, 2/3 completions. But even some of the completions were tough catches.
Yeah, and I mean, the one completion downfield that could have very easily been 0 for 7 with an interception, because the one completion downfield was the catch by CJ Daniels. That was one of the catches of the year sort of candidates, that and the Indiana, the Omar Cooper catch at the end of Penn State, of the Penn State game. Those are the two that kind of jumped to mind in terms of the, how did he do that kind of catches? Because there was a Notre Dame safety right there expecting to have the ball fall into his arms. And CJ Daniels really saved the day with a heck of a throw there. But one of the things earlier in that play, everyone remembers the catch. What you don't remember is earlier in the play, Carson Beck is unloading it with a defender right in his face, like grabbing him and twisting him, and he's just kind of like getting rid of it. And I think that was probably a third down. It was right before halftime, certainly. I think it was a third down play where you just got to kind of get rid of it. You can't take a sack. It was a fortunate throw in some ways, but it was also an impressive play in some ways. So it was like, so much of the Carson Beck experience is like, well, he got away with it. I'm not sure it was a great process. It was a great result, but he got away with it. So, and he gets away with it often enough that you kind of go, yeah, okay, maybe this is, at some point it becomes a skill. Mm-hmm. So the other touchdown pass he had was kind of similar, where there was pressure coming at him, and he rolled left, and he threw it to Malachi Toney, and he had a nice, he's not Michael Vick out there, but he can avoid the rush, and he can sometimes make good decisions with the rush in his face, but not always. And sometimes he gets rattled, and sometimes he gets confused by coverage. But often enough, it does, it works out that you kind of go, well, I guess. I look at Carson Beck and I think he could have a really good game against Ohio State. Now, grading on the curve of what a really good game against this Ohio State defense looks like, which, if he's throwing for 6.5 yards an attempt and throws, as many touchdowns as interceptions, that's not that's a reasonably successful day against this Ohio State defense. But I still also, you see the good Carson Beck and you see the bad Carson Beck. And it's like, how are these two entities living in the same body?
Well, and we're talking about the inaccuracy, and he's the second most accurate quarterback in the nation, completing 74.5% of his passes. So what we do here is we nitpick because we are perfect. And so then we find flaws in other people, because if we don't point them out, nobody will. But there's several times in this game where he's starting off, he's just throwing it up. Like they're calling him fadeaway throws on the broadcast.
Right. Yeah.
Itself. And the one touchdown you mentioned to Malachi Tony, where it's a scramble and Tony had to flatten his route out to get to the ball. And it's like, there's a lot to be desired, but then also there's a lot that is desirable. And he, threw for 200 yards and 2 touchdowns and no interceptions. And thinking back, were there really any opportunities for interceptions in this game? And I don't have any blaring. I don't think there's just an inaccuracy, some inaccurate throws downfield, but I don't remember anywhere like, Christian Gray should have had that one, or this guy should have had that one.
Yeah, no, there wasn't anything that jumped out as, oh man, he really got. I mean, honestly, the biggest he got away with that one was the touchdown to Daniels right before halftime. That was really the play that swung the game, because it was 7-7 at that moment. When he released that ball, it was 7-7 going into halftime, and they score the touchdown there, and then they get the ball to start the second half, and they score again. You get 14 points in the middle 8 in a game that you win by 3 points. So that was really the play that won the game. And, I know that there's been a lot of narrative around this particular game because it has been such a central piece of the conversation around the college football playoff. This is one of those games where, are you the type of person, and there are inside of you, there are 2 wolves, and one of the wolves says, if you end the game with more points than the other team, it doesn't matter how you got there, basically. And then the other one says, well, that game was basically a coin flip because it was tied with a minute or whatever left in the game. And Miami really got outplayed for long stretches of the second half. When you look at the drive chart in this one, it's Notre Dame had in the second half, Notre Dame's drives after Miami took the 21-7 lead. After that, Notre Dame's drives, they had 1 3 and out, but then had an 11-play 64-yard touchdown. They had a drive where they had the ball got deflected 3 times, and Ruben Bain ended up coming down with it, which is probably, that's one of those great play. Not sure you can bank on that happening in the future. Then 10 plays, 54 yards, and 3 plays, 75 yards, and they scored 17 points on the 3 drives where they didn't have that interception. Miami, on the other hand, had 4 straight drives where 3 plays, 9 yards punt, 3 plays, -4 yards punt, 4 plays, 8 yards. After that interception, they got the ball in field goal range and did nothing with it, kicked a field goal, and then 3 plays, 2 yards punt. And then after that, 10 plays, 46 yards to kind of run the game out. Miami got outplayed quite a bit in that second half. And I think it's very easy. If you're a Miami fan, you're going scoreboard, nothing else matters. You look at a lot of the down-to-down stuff. Miami outgained them on a yards per play basis, 5.2 to 5.4 to 4.7. I think I have not gone back and looked at the Parker Fleming, how bad did we get beat? I would guess that Miami probably won won it on a down-to-down basis. So, you can point and say scoreboard, but also I did not come away from that game thinking if these 2 teams played 10 times, Miami would win all 10. It was like, if these 2 teams played 10 times, Miami maybe wins 5, maybe, but they won the one that happened.
Yeah, where's the game played?
Right.
Home field would have some say in that one.
Yep.
That interception, the ball was kicked, and I was thinking, isn't that supposed to be a dead ball at that point? Because the Nebraska-Missouri thing,
right? Yeah, the Matt Davidson one. Yeah,
30 years ago.
No, that was an intentional kick. I don't know that it was an intentional kick.
No, this was not.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably like the NHL where the puck can go into the goal off your skate, but if there's a kicking motion, then it doesn't count. It's probably kind of that. That was some fortunate bounces, but
I didn't remember that interception when I was looking at the box score before I started watching the game. I'm like, Ruben Bain has an interception? And then you're watching the ball just come, bouncing up and down. An incredible play by the Miami defense as a whole. And then you can just see Reuben Bain just come barreling in, catching the ball. And, and we will talk about him, I'm sure, eventually. But
so let's talk a little bit about the run game, because I forgot Jordan Lyle started this game for Miami, and he's been banged up this year. Mark Fletcher and Jordan Lyle are both names that Ohio State fans will know from recruiting, and both of them ended up signing with Miami. Lyle has been banged up a bunch this year. He's averaged 3.1 yards per carry, hasn't played since November 8th. So not someone who has had the year that he would have expected. But this was another one where Mark Fletcher looked pretty solid. I mean, he's 15 carries, 66 yards, nothing amazing, but kind of just kept the ball moving. They ran for 3.1 yards per carry in this one, which is not fantastic by any means. But it was also, this is a pretty good defense. I think this is much more in line with what I would expect from Miami in terms of being able to run the ball than what you saw against Texas A&M. Texas A&M, Mark Fletcher went 17 carries for 172 yards. It's 15 carries for 66 yards. If you can average 4.5 yards a carry against Ohio State, that's a very good outcome if they can average that much with their running back. I just, I know the last thing everyone saw was Mark Fletcher just absolutely tearing up Texas A&M. Like, I would encourage you to find where Texas A&M is on the yards per carry allowed leaderboard this year, because you're going to have to control F Texas, and then you're going to have to hit next a couple times to get down there to find Texas A&M. They were, I think, 66th entering that game, and probably lower than that now. But I thought that looking at how well Miami was able to run the ball, and Marty Brown, who was he was the other one who was involved, and he averaged 3.6 yards a carry. He had a touchdown on the ground, long of just 8 yards, but it was just it was enough. Between the two, it was 30 carries for 115 yards. If Miami can do that against Ohio State, Miami's got a decent chance to win the game, because then you can kind of control the ball, keep the ball out of Ohio State's hands, and also keep Ohio State from being able to just, ready for your football cliche, pin their ears back, Tony, and rush Carson Beck. That's the kind of stuff. If Miami can keep Ohio State honest with the run like they did against Notre Dame, that I think would be a pretty big factor.
Yeah, right now, Miami would take 30 for 120 from their top two running backs in this game and shoot 25 of those, maybe Mark Fletcher, basically getting things going. His long was just 15 yards, but it was just solid. He wasn't really starting to slow down or get stopped until the end when they knew they were running the clock out. So the road was a little bit tougher traveling. You mentioned 4.5 yards per carry. If Miami can do that, Texas did that against Ohio State, led to 7 points. So that's a great, you would take that. You would take 4.5 yards, because that's the only team that has done that against Ohio State. Michigan was 4.2, Purdue's 4.2, Indiana's 3.5. So yeah, I will take the season high if we can get it, and then go from there, because that was a game that was, it ended up being a 7-point game. If you can have a 1-score game in the fourth quarter, I think Miami would take that. Now, Miami fans are, considering like, well, you don't think they could be up by multiple scores? Why would they want to go ahead and just go ahead and make this a 1-score game right off the bat when we know that they could make it a 3-score game in the fourth quarter? I don't know that Miami's coaches are talking like that. They're going to talk about how this is going to be a 4-quarter game. And if you could guarantee this be a 1-score game in the fourth quarter, whichever way, they would take that.
Right. I think Miami would be happy to have this be a 1-score game in the fourth quarter, because you could see Miami. We'll get into the specifics of the matchup, but we've said a bunch of times already, in terms of just matchups, like you're looking at the NCAA tournament and it's like, okay, yeah, this team's a 5 seed and this team's a 12 seed, but hey, the 12 seed does these things that could make it a difficult matchup for the 5. That's kind of where I am on this one, where Ohio State's a 2, Miami's a 10, but Ohio State, if you can pressure Julian Sayin, we saw, it's the Indiana game plan. Can you pressure Julian Sayin, get him off his spot, get him to take his eyes off of the downfield and focus on the pass, the pass pro, and can you hold Ohio State's run game in check, and all that kind of stuff. All that adds up to turning this into a rock fight. Miami doesn't want to play this game in the 30s, because no one has scored 17 points against Ohio State this year. And I don't expect Miami to be the first team to put 30 points on
Right.
Ohio State's defense. So, the plan to beat Ohio State this year is beat them 17-13, beat them 13-10. This is not a team you're going to beat 42-41 like the Georgia Peach Bowl a couple of years ago. That's not going to be what this game is, especially if Miami's going to win. And just to sort of put some stats in perspective here, Ohio State, 5th in the nation, allowing 2.83 yards per carry. Miami, 9th in the nation, allowing 2.87 yards per carry. Notre Dame, 11th in the nation, allowing 2.96 yards per carry. Indiana is 10th. They're the only team between Miami and Notre Dame. So just to sort of, these are, we're talking about very, very, very good run defenses. I'm not expecting either team to be able to run the ball particularly well, particularly consistently. If one of these teams can do it, that goes a long way towards having that team be the one that advances to the Fiesta Bowl.
Yeah, definitely agree there. We saw Malachi Toney. This was his first career start for the Hurricanes. 6 catches, 82 yards, 1 touchdown. The offense has not yet been unleashed into the full Malachi Toney offense. This was just some feeling out. 10, but still 10 targets. Mm-hmm. And like right away, they know like, okay, he's one of our top weapons. We're going to have to use him. CJ Daniels, you mentioned with the touchdown catch, 5 catches, 46 yards. And again, these are some of the things that we talked about with the Texas A&M rewatch, where it's like, clearly if CJ Daniels can do that, and again, there was a one-handed catch, like behind him and incredible. Mm-hmm. And so that's what he's capable of. And we know what all of these guys are capable of. It's just another matter of going out and doing it and putting it up there against the best defenses that you'll face. And it's a tough order, but the capability is there for so many of these guys. This is Miami. They're talented. They'll always be talented. It's just a matter of putting it all together, being cohesive, being disciplined, and doing it and beating the guys across from you. So that's one thing. And then the last thing I just want to touch on the Miami offensive line, which I can still consider to be very, very good. Notre Dame, 2 tackles for loss in this game, 1 sack. There were some penalties, a couple of penalties. But overall, again, impressed with the Miami offensive line and the ability to just grind it out. I know there's talk about how when they moved to the pistol against Texas A&M, they were able to run the ball better. And this was there's no pistol in this that I can recall. This is all just running out of the shotgun, basically. And it's okay, but it's not great. And I don't know. Again, that Texas A&M is a 1-game sample size. I don't know that you can just plug that in.
Yeah.
But you do have to consider it.
Yeah, well, I gave you all of the numbers about where, all these other teams are talking about placed in terms of yards per carry allowed. Texas A&M 68th in the nation, which is not in the same stratosphere as pretty much any of the teams that Miami's going to be facing moving forward, because Ohio State is 5th in the nation, Georgia is 7th in the nation. Ole Miss feels like probably not relevant to this conversation, but on the other half of that bracket, Texas Tech, Indiana. These are all teams. Oregon is the weakest of the teams that we'd potentially be talking about, and they're 19th in the nation in terms of run defense. So, this is not going to be an easy playoff for anyone to run the ball, I don't think, among the teams that I'd sort of expect to be playing beyond New Year's Day.
No, lots of low scores, and I think people are expecting that. Mm-hmm. Do you want to move to the defense here?
Sure. Let's move to the defense. And I think we have to start up front because right away in this game, I think it might have been Akeem Mesidor and Ruben Bain sharing a sack, but Bain finished with half a sack. Akeem Mesidor had a sack and a half. It's not fancy. They are just whooping dudes. It is not, oh, look, they're doing twists and they're doing stunts and they're playing all sorts of games up front. It is just, nope, I'm going to whoop the dude in front of me and then I'm going to sack the quarterback. That is good news and bad news, depending on how you want to look at it. Because Ohio State's been vulnerable in terms of the offensive line a lot this year has been when teams are doing twists, when teams are running stunts up front, and they have not always done a great job of picking those up. Well, this is a come right at you kind of team. And that's, Indiana had a lot of sort of creative games up front that helped them get the 5 sacks that they got against Ohio State. That's not Miami's game. And this is not the time of year when it's going to be like, well, we're going to install all sorts of new stuff up front, like all, new defensive line uploading, like, in the Matrix where it's just, I know Kung Fu.
Yeah,
That's not, you can't do that with the defensive line. So, now it's going to be, can your dudes beat my dudes, basically, rather than some of the stuff that has not worked particularly well, or that has not worked particularly well for Ohio State, that has worked particularly well against Ohio State.
There was a 3rd and 4 in this game where Miami just rushed 3, and 2 of the 3 are Messidor and Bain, and they got there. And that's an unstoppable defense. If you can rush 3 on 3rd and 4, intermediate down, and drop in coverage and sack the quarterback or influence the quarterback, that's hard to stop. In terms of the games that they played, the one thing that I saw that was a little bit unfair is when they would rush them from the same side. And we're talking about the 2 Miami defensive ends in Akeem Messidor and Ruben Bay, and it's like, well, that's kind of, aren't we supposed to be sporting here? Let's be nice about it. But those 2 guys, as you said, they're just brutes and athletic, and Ohio State will. I think they'd rather see that, though. Ohio State would rather see what Miami shows than a lot of what Indiana shows. Now, the difference is the talent that comes with it. I think Miami has the more talent up front, especially now with the Indiana injury to Stephen Daly. But it's a more, what you're going to get. Now, what you're going to get is going to be very good, but you've got to be ready for it. And then even early on, defensive tackles. You had Justin Scott reading a screen and blowing it up for a forced fumble on a wide receiver. It's not fair for a receiver to have to catch a screen and then turn back and get hit by a 310-pound defensive tackle. And so he did well. David Blade blew up a quarterback draw in this one, number 11, another defensive tackle. So the interior was also making plays in this one, especially early on.
Well, and what I had written down was that play by Justin Scott, the Ruben Bain interception, those were both plays that were made outside the numbers. Those are defensive linemen going sideline to sideline. That is not something you see all the time. And, the Bain ball was batted up in the air a couple times. He had a little extra time to get out there, but he also was, he was hustling out there. The Scott one, he's dropping into coverage but still, to get out there that quickly was really impressive. Ahmed Moten, the defensive tackle, he had a couple nice plays in this one. He was injured at the end of that Texas A&M game. Mario Cristobal had an update on, I think, Monday, and said that they were sort of hopeful to get Mohamed Toure, the linebacker, Ahmed Moten, and safety Zachariah Poyser. He was sort of hopeful that all 3 of those guys would get back, which that's one of those updates where it's like, that sounds like an update, but yeah, of course you're hoping those guys get back. I don't know if that's actually an update, but that if they get Moten back, that's just, the interior of that defensive line is really solid. The ends get a lot of the hype, but the interior of that defensive line is a lot like last year's Ohio State defensive line, where you spent all the time hearing about Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau, and those guys were fantastic, but Tyleik Williams, Ty Hamilton, those guys on the inside of the defensive line were a really key part of why they were so good, especially against the run. And that's, I think that's going to be true for Miami this year as well.
Yeah. And when we do these games, and it's like, what are the other players that flash? For me, again, it's, Keontae Scott, Nickelback, who Jeremiah Smith was asked about on Monday. And the question from Zoom was like, Jeremiah, can you talk about cornerback Keontae Scott? He's like, well, actually, he's a nickelback. So clearly Jeremiah Smith can't talk about him. And it's like first play of this game, Keontae Scott is blitzing right off the edge, and he's involved in so many different things. And I think, which game was it where he was not playing? Was it the one?
Pitt?
Might have been Pitt, where he was not playing. And so it's like, then you watch Texas A&M, you watch this, and like, who is it? This guy's good. And they have so many defensive backs and so many, and it seems like they rotate them. They'll put different corners in there, different safeties. Because even freshman Bryce Fitzgerald, who's like a backup free safety, rotates in, has 5 interceptions on the season, had 2 interceptions against Texas A&M. And they've got so many guys involved in the secondary. And I think, being Miami, I'm sure they're all pretty good. Now, I don't know how much Notre Dame really attacked. They attacked downfield a little bit.
Not much.
But it's like you've got a redshirt freshman quarterback. We saw how Ohio State was very conservative with their redshirt freshman quarterback in the season opener, going downfield maybe like once. And so you're still waiting to see an attacking offense that isn't limited by the conditions.
Yeah.
You know?
Right. Yeah. We spent a lot of that Texas A&M Miami game saying, listen, you can't hold this against the Miami passing game. It was incredibly windy. That's all true. Guess what? You can't give the Miami secondary that much credit because it was also windy when Texas A&M had the ball. This is not the old Notre Dome where they turn the air conditioner on when the opposing team is on off. No, that's not, you gotta pick one, and either Miami's offense really couldn't throw the ball at all, or Texas A&M's offense was hampered by the same wind. So I am interested to see, I don't know what the weather conditions were in like the SMU game. I know we watched the Louisville game already, when it first happened. I would like to see if we can find the SMU game, because that's one where SMU has a pretty good passing offense. If the weather conditions were decent that day, I'm interested to see what that looks like against this Miami secondary. But, the secondary on the whole is really solid, and they do have pretty good depth there where, if someone does go down, there is another guy to put in. Bryce Fitzgerald, I did not realize he showed up in the summer. He was not an early enrollee. He was a summer enrollee. So to go out and be out there as early as he was, that is officially a capital N name to know in terms of the future of Miami football for sure. The one thing that I thought was notable, not necessarily a great way, Notre Dame was not able to run the ball too well most of the game, but on their first touchdown drive, they found something in Miami defense where they hit a couple like 15, 20-yard kind of runs. They looked running the ball against Miami just in that one drive, like Miami did at times on that sort of last drive against Texas A&M. But they didn't. Notre Dame didn't stick with the run. It was amazing. They were calling it out on the broadcast that it was almost halftime, and past halftime. Jeremiah Love had 4 rushes through like 40 minutes of the game, and that's someone who ended up as a Heisman finalist. So they weren't throwing the ball downfield. They were being very conservative with the passing game, but also they weren't giving it to their future Heisman finalist running back. And it was like, boy, I don't agree with a lot of the foot. I don't know. There are choices being made here, and I don't particularly love them.
Yeah, that's one of my notes here is, Tom, do you think Bo Jackson will have more than 4 carries with 7:19 left in the third quarter? Because that's what Jeremiah Love had in there. And Jadarian Price, who also just recently announced he's turning pro, 6 for 45 with a long of 30. They're just, the passing game is an extension of the run game with the short stuff that they were throwing, because they came out throwing screens, and it's like, yeah, that's great. But 10 carries for 33 yards for Jeremiah Love, like, hey, that's a little bit, that's a lot less than, frankly, what everybody was expecting. When CJ Carr has 11 carries now, 2 or 3 sacks, but frankly, Carr was pretty good, effective running the ball. I don't think that has anything to do with what we're going to see from Julian Sayin.
No.
But Carr was doing a pretty good Riley Leonard impersonation for a while at times in this one. But it's not a lot of plays, 58 plays overall in offense for them.
Yeah, and I watched CJ Carr run the ball, and there were a couple times when he handed it and there was something there on the keep. I wonder if you're at the point of the season where now Julian Sayin is going to hang on to one or two of those. You only have to pull it once or twice to keep the defense honest. Because I think right now the defense is going, well, if he's either going to hand the ball off or he's going to throw it. It's like, well, there is a secret option C there. Ohio State has just not chosen that very often. You need to make sure you keep him away from Mohamed Toure, because he will atomize you if he hits you. But
he'll atomize himself too.
Yeah. But this is one of these games where you're watching and it's like, well, I don't know how much to take away from the Notre Dame offensive performance here, because it's a young quarterback in his first start, and it's a team that doesn't have Ohio State caliber wide receivers, but it does have a running quarterback. And it's just, there's not a ton of overlap there between what you saw there and what what you're going to see out of Ohio State against this Miami defense. The one thing that I did think was really impressive out of Miami was the goal line run defense was really good. Notre Dame would get down there, and CJ Carr had to run one in himself, which again, not sure how much that applies to what Ohio State's going to do. But, just when Notre Dame tried to line up and run the ball, Notre Dame's got a good offensive line. Notre Dame's got good running backs, and they couldn't punch the ball in, and ended up having to throw one. I think it maybe had a play action pass to like a tight end or something for the touchdown. we've been saying this for weeks, 2 months, 2 years for this Ohio State offense. If you have a Jeremiah Smith, if you have a Carnell Tate, you need to split them out wide. You need to, number one, keep them on the field. Number two, split them out wide. And number three, if there's one guy on them, you need to throw them the football. And it doesn't matter if it's first and goal at the 1 or first and goal at the 5. You need to throw them the football. And the points count the same. You get 6 points for throwing it in. You get 6 points for running it in. I don't think running it in is going to be particularly easy against this Miami defense. So I would take the road less traveled and, consider throwing the ball.
And when you throw the ball into the end zone against Miami, 3 things could happen, and 2 of them are good: touchdown, incompletion, or a flag.
Mm-hmm.
So,
can you come up with one example of that? Come on.
But the Miami kicker's got a leg.
Mm-hmm.
He was good from 38, 47, alone from 47, could have been much longer. Punter Joyce, 5 punts, 42.6 yard average, nothing in the 20, nothing over 50. Very, how do I say this? Joe Maguirean.
Yeah, well, he's Australian, so
Well, there you go.
That's but yeah, it was unremarkable. It wasn't bad. It wasn't good. It was fine. I did think the kicker Davis was very impressive, based on the fact that at the beginning of the broadcast, they're talking about the fact that he was an FAU transfer. It's like, oh, was he amazing at FAU? 4 for 11. So no, he was not. But this year he was really good, and he had obviously all of the missed kicks against Texas A&M, which again I kind of chalk up to the I chalk up to the weather there, because he on the year is 15 of 20, but he missed 3 field goals?
Mm-hmm.
So he missed 5 field goals all year, and 3 of them were against Texas A&M. So, that to me says that's probably a lot more wind than it is anything else, because he had missed, the only other field goal he missed all year was against Stanford. Every other field goal he made this year. So,
and NC State.
Oh, and NC State. Yeah, he did miss one more. You're right.
But the wind in that game, you saw there was one kick where the wind is blowing it right, and then it's like, nah, I'm going to blow it left.
Mm-hmm.
And what are you supposed to do?
Yeah. So he's someone who, coming off that game, if the first time you watched Notre Dame, or for the first time you watched Miami all season was that Texas A&M game, you're looking at that and going, oh boy, they can't kick a field goal at all. It's like, no, this will be indoors. There won't be any wind. The place kicking should be fine.
And with this game, and we'll talk about it more, but field goals aren't necessarily losses in these low scoring games that we're going to see. And I do believe he is a weapon for them in this game, because the conditions are going to be perfect. So that's something to consider for Miami. Anything else?
I think we covered most of the big takeaways there, and then we'll see if we can find one of those kind of more interesting games from mid-season and see where what we can learn from that.
The last thing for me is the Malachi Tony whip routes where he starts, looks like it's going to be a mesh route, and then he's like, no, I'm going to back outside.
Mm-hmm.
Those are so tough to handle, and it's going to be interesting to see what Ohio State chooses to do to defend him, and how many players they use to do it. So
I lied. One more thing.
Yeah.
Last drive of the game. That I thought was a very interesting takeaway in terms of when Miami knows you have to throw the ball, you are in deep trouble. That was the first time all game that Notre Dame was really had to throw the ball. There was no threat of a run at all. And they completed one pass for a first down, and then I think it went intentional grounding to avoid a sack, and then a sack, and then a sack. And it was just absolutely teeing off on CJ Carr. And it wasn't like they were bringing the house. It was just, okay, here are the 3 defensive linemen or 4 defensive linemen, and they are just going to get back there, and you're not going to have time to do anything. If you are in predictable passing situations, you are not in for a good time against this Miami defense.
Yeah, they don't need the blitz to make it a bad time.
Nope.
They can just get it with their front 4. So there's a lot for Julian Sand and Carson Hinsman Center to communicate about in terms of keeping everybody on the same page with the protection. So that will do it. This is what we've learned about Miami and how it applies to Ohio State. And go ahead and leave your comments for the Miami fans. If you're listening, if you're watching, we don't mind doing like a listener questions episode
Mhm.
from the opposing fan base. So if you've got some questions that you want us to answer about your team, about Ohio State, then we'll do that. Go ahead and throw them in the comments. We'll have to fine tooth comb them to figure out the good stuff from the bad stuff in terms of some of the interactions we have with the Miami fans. But if you want to go throw in some comments, questions in on this video, try to pull them and maybe do a show later in the week or before the game. Certainly, we'd appreciate that. And of course, if you're watching, you want to hit the thumbs up, we'd appreciate that as well. You can find this Buckeye Weekly podcast on all of your podcast platforms. Tom's Daily Buckeyes tomorrow morning. Search that up. You can find that as well. That will do it from here. Thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk to you all later.